Welcome to Keiser Voices, the story of success, brought to you by Keiser University Graduate School, here where the academic world meets personal triumph. Join us today as we dive into the captivating tales of success.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Keiser. I'm the Vice-Chancellor of the Graduate School. I'll be the guest for this episode of our Keiser University Voices podcast, which is sponsored by the Graduate School. What I'll be talking about is entrepreneurship, developing an entrepreneurial mindset, and aspects of opening and starting a business that most people may not think about, the risks and the rewards. With that being said, I think it's really important to understand what makes an entrepreneurial mindset. What are their attributes that entrepreneurs hold that make them unique, but also make them successful? And how does that attribute or result in business success? So the values that I've been able to derive, and I think that this is not an all-encompassing list, but some of the attributes of entrepreneurs is that they are risk-taking. They're not risk-adverse. Ultimately, anyone who tries to open up a new venture needs to have a risk tolerance because most entrepreneurs start with very little money. They may look for investors. They may look for seed money from elsewhere. But at the end of the day, they are on the line. They are the first employee, often the only employee for some years. And the success rate of new businesses is very low. Most businesses do not make it. So there needs to be a risk tolerance. Additionally, I believe that, of course, which is true for any type of work, dedication and hard work are essential, but especially when you're an entrepreneur. The reason being is that, as I mentioned, for many years, you may be the only employee. You may be the person who is the janitorial staff, but also running the cashier, or also handling the logistics, also making executive decisions on purchasing expenses and things of that nature. So you need to be dedicated to your craft. You needed to work hard, work around the clock, 24/7, 7 days a week. One of the items that was taught to me from a young age that most people don't realize, that when Dr. Arthur Keiser started the school in 1977, he didn't actually take home a paycheck till 1989. All of his money that he would make would be reinvested back into the university. When we started the Primrose School, which I'll talk about a little bit more in the near future in this podcast, which I'm an owner of, it was a lot of hard work and dedication to get the school started, to go through the permitting process, to prospect the teachers, to prospect the land for acquisition. But ultimately, it is a lot of hard work and you need to be dedicated. And the other thing I would say is, for any entrepreneur to be successful, you need to be a student of what you do. So your dedication is not limited to working in your business. You need to work outside your business so you can acquire the skills necessary to be successful. I think another attribute of an entrepreneur, and this might seem like a contradiction, but ultimately I'll try to piece it together to make it make sense. You need to be a good listener, but you also need to be resolute in your principles and exercise strong judgment. So what does that mean? One of the mistakes I think entrepreneurs make is that they have to go about it themselves. That's what they believe. They believe they're investing their life savings, they're doing the work, they're the one-man band or the one-woman band, and therefore their idea will carry them through. The reality of successful people is that successful people are never successful completely by themselves. I would always recommend for people to seek business advice. I would always recommend to seek guidance from those around them, loved ones that they can trust, friends that they can trust that have good business acumen. Don't feel that you are alone. With that being said, though, the entrepreneur also needs to know who they can ask for advice, who they should seek counsel from, but also make determinations on their own about what they believe is right and what they believe is the necessary path. What do I mean by that? Many business ventures, according to experts or external stakeholders, are doomed to fail. Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft, You can name a multitude. Under Armour, which started in the basement in Georgetown in DC, of an individual named Kevin Plank, who just started making fabrics because he was working with the University of Maryland football team and thought there was a better sweat wicking material you could use, and he started in the basement. Most would say that those ventures will never be as successful as they were. Most experts would say, well, I don't see where their path to success is, and they're likely to fail. And statistically, they're probably accurate. They're probably right. But entrepreneurs need to be able to be determined and resolute in their opinion and say, no matter what, I will make this successful. My idea is a strong one. As long as I can operationalize it, work hard, I can make it a reality. That's where you have to balance seeking counsel with and listening to others' opinions, but also being stubborn enough to stick it out. So judgment, of course, which cannot be taught. And that's why many people say there are a lot of intangibles of entrepreneurship that cannot be taught academically, or even interpersonally. You may have to be born with those attributes, and that's debated often with items like leadership and entrepreneurship. But I do believe judgment is something that you gain from experience. You have it through your family upbringing, but also some of it is innate. But I do think that's an important characteristic of entrepreneurship. I think as well, another aspect, if I were to throw in another piece of the puzzle, is that I do believe and have seen that entrepreneurs lead with purpose. They don't lead for money or financial gain. Of course, most people start a business because at the end of the day, they want to support themselves and they want to support their families. That's a given. That's table stakes. However, I think those who are most successful seek a need, seek an opportunity, because they believe that they can bring the most value. They can change the world. They can build a better mousetrap. Whatever your motivation may be, I think those that are truly successful, those are truly innovators, leaders in this society. They have motivations far beyond money. This might be a romanticized view to some, and I'm sure many would disagree with this and say, oh, well, that sounds really great in the textbook. That sounds really great coming from you. But at the end of the day, I do believe it. I believe working for purpose is a stronger motivating factor, not only internally, but externally to others when they're thinking about investing in your organization, thinking about whether they believe that you're the person who's going to be successful. Because at the end of the day, when you're a startup, they invest in the leadership team as much as they invest in the idea. I do think that working for a greater purpose than money is an incredibly important aspect of entrepreneurship. And I'll just give an example. Elon Musk, who's now the second richest man in the world, depending on the day that you measure affluence, he will always tell you, and I read his biography and I found it really interesting, that he would always tell anyone who asked him, well, why would you start a company like Tesla? Or why would you start SpaceX? Or why would you start the Boring Company? Or why would you start Neuralink? And all these incredible ventures, each, if they stood alone on their own, would be incredibly modern, lucrative, successful organizations. There's always a incredibly aspirational thought behind why he starts companies, almost ridiculous in certain ways. But if you ask Musk in his biography, and they did, why did you start SpaceX? He believes that civilization in Mars is absolutely essential to the continuation of human consciousness, because one day Earth will no longer exist. So he believes that humans need to become interplanetary species, and that's why he started the rocket program. Now, that might sound far-fetched. Clearly, he's a dreamer. When he had in the biography, he had a conversation with Bill Gates. Bill Gates even thought that was somewhat crazy, but that's what he believes. Why did he start Tesla? He didn't start Tesla so that he can make the most successful car company in the modern age, which that's what he has done. He didn't start Tesla because he thought he can enrich himself, become a billionaire, which he has. He started Tesla because he wanted to demonstrate to the world that one, the future is in solar and electricity. And then two, that humans need to be more sustainable, that the future of the automotive industry and the future of transportation has to get away from fossil fuels at some point. He saw that as a climate responsible solution to a challenge that will plague humans as long as we use fossil fuels. So that's why he got into the electric car business. You can debate the merits of how sustainable his cars really are. But I think it's undeniable that he is the leader in a revolution for EVs. And you see the Biden administration and multiple car companies trying to follow his lead in making electric cars widespread and mainstream. Additionally, I believe there are many examples of entrepreneurs who felt that they could provide a solution. They could build a better mousetrap. With Keiser University, for example, the reason that Dr. Arthur Keiser and Mrs. Evelyn Keiser started the university was an idea that they didn't believe post-secondary education was serving motivated students who were looking to aspire for professional occupation. They didn't believe that they served those students well. They didn't believe that students were engaged in learning. They didn't believe that universities truly cared about their students. Ergo, that had a negative impact on their potential for success. So it started with an idea. In fact, they both said that there was a good chance that they would never make any money. They would never be successful. And fast forward to today, and obviously it's true that they were successful. The money came and all these things. But I think a lot of successful businessmen and women will tell you that if you focus on purpose as opposed to monetizing or enriching yourself, you will build a better business and a better product. So those are the attributes that I think are key to being a successful entrepreneur. Understanding that entrepreneurs in general, and this goes back to the risk-taking aspect, typically are not successful. Most businesses do fail, and many of the individuals we hold in high regard as having incredible business acumen, they started companies that went bankrupt or failed or started in partnerships that broke apart. Musk is one of those individuals. Dr. Keiser is one of those individuals. I'm one of those individuals. So it's not all about whether you're always successful. Actually, it's quite the opposite. It's as Edison mentioned, and he's talking about how you make his light bulb. Well, he had thousands of experiments that did not go well, and he learned from all those experiments. So I think, if I can give a maxim about being an entrepreneur, is that when you are starting, you have to have the mindset that you're never going to lose. You either are going to win and be successful, or you're going to learn. And I think that's an important mindset for the entrepreneur. As we segue into other aspects of entrepreneurship, I could speak about a moment where I think it tested my entrepreneurial spirit, and could speak to some achievements and challenges. I think that if I look back on my history with, starting either campuses from scratch, starting new businesses like Primrose from scratch, I think that what I would say was really a challenge for me, and where it really tested my spirit, is not a relatively impatient person. I'm a person that has great urgency, that never doubts whether they're going to work hard enough to be successful. But what I can tell you in business, it's not always about being intelligent. It's not always about having the great idea. It's not even all about even having the financing. A lot of it's about timing and sometimes being patient and getting lucky. I think being lucky is somewhat an aspect of a successful business that maybe a lot of people don't want to admit to, but it is true. There is a portion of luck. And so where do I see like that as a specific moment in the challenge? What I can tell you is that in two circumstances, we were really challenged in terms of whether we'd be successful, whether the timing was correct. When we started the Primrose School, we prospected the Royal Palm Beach area because of its proximity to Wellington and having a demographic that could, afford to go to our school, that paid for a high quality and the highest quality early learning center in the country, from ages 0 to 5. One of the things that challenged me was that the city didn't really want our project. We worked with the franchise, Primrose. We identified the site. They have an algorithm to determine what MSAs are appropriate for starting for starting schools, I should say. And the Royal Palm Beach municipal government wasn't so favorable, even though the site that we took over was previously a school. And that was very frustrating to me because I saw the school as a community benefit. I couldn't understand why they were giving us such a hard time. We had a real struggle opening up the toddlers room, and we had to tell parents that they had to wait. I had many parents pull their students from their wait list that they were on, ask for their deposits back, which we refunded, because they couldn't wait any longer because we were in a battle with the city. And I think, what that was really manifested to me, and I think most business owners understand this, is that you can run a successful operation, but you are part of a larger ecosystem. And if the larger ecosystem, government, licensing boards, politicians, whatever it may be within the community stakeholders, population community, they don't want you, it becomes very, very difficult, and you have to fight for your right to exist. So there was times where we thought we were going to be closed down. There were times that we thought we wouldn't be able to make payroll and pay our people. And that was really difficult, to really struggle and to start and get it up and running. And we had to fight the battle with the city. And my wife's a land use attorney, and she did an incredible job representing the school and really starting the school ops. But you realize that there's a lot of challenges that you have to overcome, a lot of adversity you have to overcome that might be beyond just running an organization and supporting students and doing things the right way, that play a role, and you have to overcome that. With Southeastern College, I would say when we would open campuses, and when we were offering degree programs, Southeastern College operates in a very stringent regulatory environment. And what you realize in that situation as well is you're part of a larger, broader ecosystem. You have to adhere to regulations like gainful employment or 90/10 or BDR, borrower's defense for payment. And you can only do so many things to be compliant, but also be innovative. And, that tests your spirit, because entrepreneurs in general are innovative. They want to push the envelope. They want to do groundbreaking ideas, but sometimes government or the alphabet soup hinders your ability to be innovative. So you just really need to think outside the box. You need to understand that compliance comes first, innovation then comes second in those kind of circumstances, but understanding you can still get to where you want to be, even though regulatory challenges like the regulations I mentioned make it very difficult to launch new programs. I remember when we were in South Carolina with the Commission of Higher Education, and I would say this, this is a public forum, so I guess I'm saying this in public. I thought the Commission of Higher Education was discriminatory to our institution, to Southeastern College, did not want us to compete with the community colleges and add programs that was very clear from market demand analysis. There was a shortage in radiologic technologists and ultrasound techs and nursing in South Carolina and the Charleston and Columbia communities. They needed more schools. They needed more grads, but they didn't want us to compete with the community college. And just feeling that no matter how good your case is, no matter how good of a school you were, no matter what you did to make a case, that this board that determines your fate may always be against you. We waited for 18 months, even though the typical approval process for starting new programs is 4 months to get even heard. And what I realized, there was one individual on the board, out of respect for them, I won't name the name, but she was adamantly and vehemently against our proposal. And I never understood why. I met with her in person and she said it's not personal. It's just a matter of perspective. Never really understood what the perspective was. Certainly felt like it was personal. But what you realize is that to be a proper entrepreneur, to deliver outcomes for your organization and your stakeholders and the people who count on you, you have to have stick-to-itiveness. You have to be persistent. You have to not take no as an answer, and we didn't. And at the end of the day, we got the votes that we needed, and we rolled the chair. The chair was against us, and the entire board voted against the chair. So that those two specific moments when you had legislators and gubernatorial appointees who are against you and what you believe is right, and you fight them in the proper channels and you advocate for your students. What it taught me was that you're part of a broader ecosystem. That was what the challenge taught me. And that if you stick it out and you fight with purpose, you can make it happen. So I think those were the specific moments and challenges that I harken back to. And I think those can be extrapolated and generalized in broader context. In what ways do you keep yourself motivated during times of high stress or challenge? Well, I guess I'll go to a specific example with Southeastern College. When I took over the institution, so this was probably not so entrepreneurial, it's continuation of an organization, but I think the lessons still apply. We had not been profitable or operating at a surplus for a not-for-profit environment for some years, for about 2-3 years. We had a $5 million deficit, actually, when I took over the org, to get us right, where we could make payroll, where we could start giving raises and make a surplus or make a profit. I had to do 2 reductions in force or excuse me, 2 salary freezes and 2 reductions in force. That was hard. I'm an individual who looks at business as an opportunity to bring greater value to society. And when I believe that my family members, and that's what I refer to everyone that I work with at any of our institutions, I consider them to be family members, because I'm so honored that they will work with us, with me, with my personal, my family, my greater organizational family that will work under the Keiser or Southeastern Primrose banner. I think that's an honor. I don't see that as a given by any means. But when I can't deliver on my part of the equation to them, because ultimately they sign up for work and say, I'll do a task for the company, the university, and for Robert, because he's going to pay me and he's going to allow me to live a lifestyle that I want to live. When I can't continue to give people raises, when I can't continue to fund activities that I think will be beneficial to students, to grow our impact on students, that is emotionally very difficult for me. That cuts at my core of why I work and who do I work for. And again, I work for creating a better society. And I believe in the power of education to lift those via social mobility. So that was really hard. I was really stressed out, very emotional, very upset at myself, very upset at my situation, and had to handle numerous conversations with individuals. When we do the reduction of force, my rule is that if I'm making that decision, I'm going to deliver the message. So I had to tell a lot of people they will no longer have jobs, even though they did nothing wrong. That's really hard. That's really, really hard if you're an empathetic person in any form or fashion. So how did I motivate myself? One, I'm not a complacent person by nature. I'm constantly motivated. I'll create stress for myself just to motivate myself. But ultimately, that was easy to be motivated. In that situation, my motivation was to never let it happen again. I never wanted to be in a situation with our family members, our employees, otherwise known as, where I could not tell them that they had no longer had a job with us, even though they did nothing wrong. I told myself I would no longer be in a situation in the future, because I would do everything I would need to do, that they will continue to get raises, those that deserve them. So that was my motivation. My motivation was to do better for everyone that was under my leadership. So that was an easy one, but that was incredibly stressful for all of those of you who are aspiring entrepreneurs or have been entrepreneurs or run organizations and struggle to make payroll, or struggle to make rent, whatever it may be from a financial perspective. I faced all of those situations. You realize how hard that is on you emotionally, and how hard it is on, frankly, everyone else in the organization. So one of the questions I got asked is, how do you balance intuition and analysis when making business decisions? So basically, I think the question is, how do you know when to make a gut decision and how do you make a database decision? Well, I think at the end of the day, it's always relatively the same. What do I mean by that? I mean that when you have it, and when there is data integrity, because that's one of the things you have to ask yourself. And for all my master's and doctoral students engaged in research, one of the things that I hope you learn during your academic journey with us is that you realize that you can't take data for granted. Just because someone says a statistic is this, once you do research yourself, you realize that research can be manipulated, that methodologies dictate outcomes. So you really need to know what goes into the data collection or the aggregation, and what goes in the methodology. What data did they collect? What did they exclude? What were the variables that influence the data collection? So you got to make sure you have data integrity before you use data at all. But let's assume you have data integrity. I would say from a decision-making matrix and process, the first thing you want to do always, evaluate the data, analyze the data, develop inferences, okay? Not necessarily decisions. But then once you have the objective, quantitative aspect of decision-making, then you need to get into the subjective. And that's where I think a lot of people make mistakes. They either do only the subjective or they do only the objective. And I would always say you got to do both. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you're making a decision about, do you invest in something? Do you pursue XYZ program or whatever? There's always people who are involved in these decisions. There's always people who are going to either implement, who are going to be making decisions related to the initiative that you have, but there's always a human aspect of it. So you need to meet with your stakeholders. You need to meet with the humans that are going to operationalize your ideas, or maybe you're the human that operationalizes your ideas. And you need to determine bandwidth, competency, burnout rate, mental health, fatigue. I guess I'll go back to burnout rate, but all the intangibles of work that go into successful outcomes. Because at the end of the day, processes are great, policies are great, strategic plans are great, but if you don't have the right people, you have nothing. So you have to then evaluate your human personnel, your intangibles with your people to make a determination. Can you actually carry out what you want to do? Can you operationalize the inference you got from the data? And then at the end of that, once you have the qualitative aspect with the quantitative aspect, it's got decision-making time. There are many decisions, even once you do the proper background check, the quantitative research and the qualitative research, you still don't know, or it's still a great risk. At that point, you've done everything you can to make a proper decision. As my grandmother always told me, sometimes you just have to hold your nose and jump. Make a decision. Don't sit on the fence. Once you make that decision, you never look back, you only look forward. So that's what I would say in terms of how do you balance intuition and analysis. You do both, and you always do both when you can. I don't think any proper decision making, it does not have both the qualitative and the quantitative, the intuition without the analysis. You have to do both. So another aspect that I get asked a lot, and I taught entrepreneurship, so this kind of came up in my classes when I taught for the Fort Lauderdale campus back in the day, more so. Well, how do you know what is a good opportunity? How do you identify and capitalize on new market opportunities? I think that kind of goes back to the previous question. One, do your research. And before you do your research, like saturate yourself in the opportunity. Meaning that, let's say it's real estate, which is pretty easy to kind of all of us to understand because we all live somewhere. Let's say you see as an investment opportunity, you want to start a new business, but part of the business operation, how you're going to make money is a real estate play. Like for a lot of people don't realize, like Walgreens, they do relatively well with the operation of, say, the convenience store and the pharmacy. But the way Walgreens has made its money is that they're buying all the prime real estate in America, being on every street corner in America. And that's really their play, is the real estate play. So let's say you're starting a new business, you have a little bit of capital to play with. You can invest it in leasing or buying a space. How do you know that that is the right area to lay down your roots? How do you know what square footage? Well, you have to saturate yourself in the topic. How much square footage do you need to operate your organization? I would say have it in mind and then reduce it. Because the first thing you'll do is you want the big, beautiful Class A type of building. That is what every human wants, but that's not what every human can afford. And when you're an entrepreneur, the rule of thumb in the beginning is do more with less. Watch your expenses, grow your revenue. So what I would say is identify how much square footage and see how you can be the most efficient you can in the least amount of square footage. For example, as real estate. But you have to learn that. You have to really study and look at other business models and similar types of businesses to make a determination like that. You then want to analyze the real estate market. So, what is it a good market? Are interest rates low? Are they high? You have access to capital and financing? Is the inventory there in terms of office space, whatever it may be? So ultimately, how do you identify new market opportunities? Well, you do your data analysis, like I said in the previous question. You do your research. You look at like industries. You look at other exemplars of companies that have a similar model, for example. It doesn't even have to be similar industries. If it's a real estate play like a Walgreens, how did they do it? So you really need to do a proper analysis to really determine if there is an opportunity there. And then the second thing, I think this is more intuition, and this is what I think most students, or at least the people that ask me this question, think like, how did Bezos know that he was going to create the greatest e-commerce store in the history of the world? I don't think Jeff Bezos knew that. He started as a book delivery company. And ultimately, he saw a hole in the market for book delivery. So, how did others, how did Dr. and Mrs. Evelyn Keiser realize there was a market opportunity for a university? Well, there's a little gut to that. They just were graduate students at University of Florida and Temple and thought they had not the best experience. And they started. Did they do a huge market analysis? If you ask them, they would say no. They just felt that there was a need for a more student-focused, more career-oriented education. They happened to be right. The timing was good. How do we know that we wanted to start a Primrose? Well, that was more market analysis. I mean, we're in education, so we're a little bit more sophisticated than maybe we were in 77 as a family. But what we identified in early learning is that early learning is largely privatized, which for me and for my family is an opportunity. We identified that there's a dearth of quality early learning centers. We also realize the impact that it has on students foundationally. 0 to 4 or 0 to 5 in our case is the most important time for brain development and cognitive and interpersonal development in all students. So we thought there was a great impact. That was our purpose, to provide excellent quality education to students at a very early age so that they can be highly functioning, contributing members of society in the future, because they'll start with the right foundation, both behaviorally and academically. So at the end of the day, the data analysis with the instincts, put it together, and then you can determine if there's a need in the market. At the end of the day, too, timing. Timing is such a critical piece. I can't really tell you I have a great answer for how do you know the timing is right. I could say understand your financing lines. How are you going to how are you going to finance your project, your startup? How are you going to know if there's demand for your product in 5 years, 10 years? Try to project sales due to changes in technology or consumer preferences. That would be probably the best way to identify timing. But the thing about the future, the only thing that's certain is it's going to change. So some of it is a little bit lucky, but that's how I would say you identify and capitalize on market opportunities is you saturate yourself in the opportunity, You become a student of what you do do your market, analysis, and then you work your butt off to make it work. And you hold your nose and jump, and you take the chance. I guess another thing, advice that I would give to someone who fears taking the leap into entrepreneurship due to high risk of failure. Well, you are right. If you can ask a question like that to me, at least you did your homework. Know that the statistics are against you. The best entrepreneurs love that. They love the challenge that everyone's telling them it won't work. So one, if you're that type of person, you might have it in you to be a successful entrepreneur. If it galvanizes you when people tell you you can't, that's a good mindset. So I would say, one, you got to know that you're going to work your butt off. You're going to got to know that the odds are against you, and you got to, thrive on that. But what advice would I give someone who fears taking the leap? I would say that you really need to understand your risk tolerance, your ability to take risks. I wouldn't say entrepreneurship is for everyone. But I would say if you're going to do it and you're really adamant about taking the risk, which you have to, that's the first barrier to clear, is like, know that you're jumping into an area where you're most likely not going to be successful. That you will commit to yourself. You have to do this. You're going to make it work. No matter how much you have to work, no matter how much you got to be away from your family and your loved ones, no matter how you're going to have to come to financing, even if it's hard for you to ask for money or embarrassing to ask for money, all that pride needs to go away. I would say also, the other advice I would give you is that you have to work for purpose, as I mentioned before. Don't do it because you think you're going to make a buck. Do it because you're addressing a need, building a better mousetrap, helping society, building a better future. I also wouldn't do it because you think you're going to make money and then you're going to live a convenient life. Most of those motivations do not work out. You have to be in it for the long haul. Know it's a long journey. Know it's a hard journey. And then finally, when you internalize all of those factors and you steel yourself and you have the mettle, M-E-T-T-L-E, to pursue the path that most don't take, you got to hold your nose and jump and realize you got to get started. So many people sit on the sidelines with great ideas and they never, ever get started. I can tell you that the best laid plans, when not operationalized, never materialize into anything. They have the colloquialism, I think that, younger people use nowadays, shoot or shoot. You have to shoot. You have to start. And then once you start, you have to never give up. You have to tell yourself, I will do everything I can, everything in my power to be successful. And even though that might not be enough. And that's why I have to work so hard. I have to be the best at whatever I am and the best at whatever I do. That would be my advice. And that's why it's not for the faint of heart. That's why I would not recommend entrepreneurship for everyone. But for those who have the ambition, for those who have the tenacity, for those of you who have the risk tolerance, for those of you who are innovative, there is so much you can do to support society if you take that leap of faith. So that would be the advice I give. Know what you're getting yourself into, and then once you know, commit. With that being said, what I want to end this podcast on is a note to all aspiring entrepreneurs. For whatever it's worth, know that I respect you. Know that I understand how hard it is to start anything new. And it doesn't matter if you start an ice cream shop, like a truck, or you start a tech startup that you expect in 10 years will have $1 billion valuation, whatever. It doesn't matter what you start. It is hard and the risk of failure is high. And the personal risk to you financially, from time away from family, your relationship commitments is high. And so know that for those of you for those who have done it, who've been successful, who've also, in my case, not been successful, start a lot of new Started campuses and programs that never took off. Had to learn that was not a good decision and learn from it. Again, the thought process, you never lose, you only win or you learn. Know that I know, and most that are successful who started their own orgs in some form or fashion, know that it's hard, know that it's trying no matter what industry you do it. And there are people there who can support you. There are people who can give you good advice, but that I respect you ultimately. Even if you don't grow a business that's very successful, even if you file for bankruptcy and it doesn't work out and you're struggling to make ends meet, know that there are people that will always respect you for taking risks that others don't, especially if you work for purpose. With that being said, to all those entrepreneurs who are aspiring to create great products, great solutions for all of us, Godspeed and God bless. With that being said, again, I'm Robert Keiser. I'm the Vice-Chancellor of the Graduate School here at Keiser University. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. I encourage you to listen to our other hosts and guests on the Keiser University Voices podcast to subscribe and to follow us. We do really appreciate all your viewership. We do appreciate your feedback. If you want to contact myself or Mrs. Adriana Lovo, who is the host of the Keiser University Voices podcast, for recommendations, we would love to hear them. How do we make this better? At the end of the day, we want this to be informative for the community, so that you can use this as, say, a mini, kind of motivator, inspiration for you to do bigger and better things. Again, thank you. I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you for journeying with us today on Keiser Voices, the Story of Success. As we close this chapter, remember, every story has its next page.